Good morning, everyone. Welcome to everyone here, all friends, colleagues in the room and online. My name is Eric Carlson. I have the super pleasure of co-hosting this event with Guler Kosha, my good colleague here from the disability team. I'm a disability specialist, but we're here actually just as colleagues to celebrate together this 3rd December International Day of Persons with Disabilities. Over to you, Guler.
Thank you so much, Eric. My name is Guler Kosha. I'm working with Eric. I am also acting as a Disability Inclusion and Gender Equality Officer for the Prospects project and also based in the Gender Equality, Diversity and Inclusion branch with Eric. So welcome to everybody. We are really happy to having you here. And before starting, we will give some very quick housekeeping rules. This event is being recorded, so we can also accommodate colleagues who couldn't join here. And for those who are able to join, it is also a great, it will be a great memory for our work later on. Mics have been muted for all of you because just to facilitate listening and easy of participation for everybody. But of course, there will be time to ask questions a bit later on. So please feel free to write your questions in the chat box already. And alongside the panel, we'll have in a bit. And of course, we'll be checking questions and answering those questions a bit later. So let's start with this event, which is hosted in the framework of the Disability Champions Network. The ILO Disability Champions Network is a network of approximately 100 colleagues, both from HQ and field offices around the world. And as Eric likes to say, it doesn't matter which grade or which post we are in, we are all H here in the network, which is we are all humans. And that's why we are united to work together. We meet different times per year, and every time our meetings are really friendly, interactive, and fun. And I'm not saying that because Eric and I are coordinating the network, but because it is really the case and because this network is really built in the work of the champions. And in a bit, we'll be hearing about the work that the champions do to implement the ILO strategy. This network has been created 3 years ago by Eric, and I am now coordinating it. And it has been focusing on different thematic areas, all relevant to disability inclusion work. The first year, we were focusing on consultation with OPDs, with organizations of persons with disabilities, bringing at the top the motto of the disability rights movement, nothing about us without us, because everything we do in the ILO is relevant to disability inclusion, from gender equality to climate change to child labor, everything. Also youth work is also really relevant, all the thematics, because disability, persons with disabilities are a very diverse community, and they are not a homogeneous group, and that's why everything we work in the ILO is connected to persons with disabilities, and it is really important to hear how it impacts them. And that's why we worked in consultation with OPDs in the Champions Network, coming up as well with the first ever online tool on this matter, which is available on ILO People, which is the ILO guidelines on consultation with OPDs, which was done through the Champion Network. And also after that, we focused for the second year on disability inclusive programs and projects, where we heard about many colleagues within the network on the work that they were doing in many countries, and also working with partnerships, colleagues, where we built the 10 tips on making disability inclusion a reality within ILO's work. And those 10 tips are available to each and every ILO colleagues who would like to take them on board. And then for this year with the network, we focused on accessible and universally accessible and inclusive meetings and events. And we have held different events explaining and providing concrete tips on how to organize an accessible and an inclusive meeting, because I believe we all organize meetings in the ILO, and persons with disabilities are not only external participants, but also our actual and everyday colleagues. This was great work, and as I said, disability champions are really important to implement the ILO strategy, and I would like to know, Eric, if you could tell us a little bit more about the strategy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Guler. And I love the fact that you brought up that nothing about us without us, because the theme for this year's International Day of Persons with Disabilities is amplifying the leadership of persons with disabilities for an inclusive and sustainable future. And that's what's just a perfect match that today we're celebrating the launch of the ILO's new disability inclusion strategy for 2024-2027. I'm not sure if our colleagues here could show on the screen that one picture that's actually the cover of the strategy that's being launched today. So it should be already live. Hopefully it'll be on the intranet on a one-stop shop. So and it's a good practice. I'm just going to describe what's going on here. So from the cover of the strategy, we see the focus is on persons with disabilities as leaders. Key to our work in disability inclusion with our offices around the world and what we do with our constituents. So it's not just what we say about inclusive programming or things that Guler was saying about in making sure that in our meetings, but actually us, are we walking the talk inside the ILO? And I think this idea about leadership, and I'll describe in a second this photograph visually, like it shows how disability inclusion is being championed by our senior leadership. And I could really, notably our Director General, whose vision for the ILO is to become an employer of choice for persons with disabilities. What's projected in this photograph is this is from 2023. It's extremely historic. It's the first meeting in the history of the ILO of a sitting Director General and an organized group of ILO staff with disabilities and with dependents with disabilities. As the alt text, as the alternative text reads when you view this document on a screen reader, this is a photo of the ILO Director General, Gilbert Hongbu, meeting with the ILO staff representatives of the Employee Resource Group, ERG, on disability inclusion, many of whom I see in the audience right now. So welcome to our ERG colleagues. And we actually have some here on the table as well. This diverse group, representing various skin colors, ages, and body types, are seated around an oval wooden table, smiling for the photograph. In the foreground to the left is an ERG representative who is a wheelchair user. To the right is the ILO blue and white flag. If what I've just said, describing out what's on the screen, is new to you and new to us, that means we still have work to do, which is a good thing. And I think the more, as Guler said, the more accessible the things we show on screens, the more accessible the way we speak and communicate is the better. Thank you very much. So the strategy is this blueprint for the ILO's work on disability inclusion for the next 4 years. Like the 2020-2023 inclusion strategy, all of the work, everything that you've been doing, all the people in the room and online, to make our buildings more accessible, on procurement, communication, programming, HR, publications, meetings, and many more topics are addressed in the strategy. And each department custodian for each area has developed their own indicators and targets. So nothing was imposed from above. I think as our colleague Sharon will talk about, years ago, we started off with a dream in a room about what we want to achieve for the future. And I think she'll walk us through a bit about what that dream looks like now. And it started with dialogue. It started with sharing and respect. So I think we've really gone a long way together as a one ILO. It's been so collaborative. And I would just say, like, well, what's better? Because we should make something better each time we make a new strategy, right? So this time, the work of the ILO policy departments will be visible. A lot of policy departments are doing a lot of great things, but they were invisible basically in the last strategy. We want to value everything in the ILO. The new strategy, and this is super important because we've got people online from our regional offices, they'll take into account the insights and needs of our regional partners and colleagues. And lastly, we're going to really try to leverage the experience of our tripartite partners, especially in mainstreaming disability inclusion, for example, in projects and programs. So today, here and online, we have just a sampling of the many persons with us who have helped write the strategy or who are already helping to implement it. And again, this is just an indication of the tireless efforts of so many people around the organization. So I'll quickly go through the agenda very quickly. We have a packed agenda, so I have to go fast. So we're going to first see the ILO's vision for disability inclusion, presented by Sukti Dasgupta, the Director of Work Quality. Then we're going to have what we call keeping the eye on the prize, which is really inclusion begins with ILO staff with disabilities, from Priya Desai, who is representing the Employee Resource Group. And then there's a much long-awaited Guler. I think we've been working on this for a year or so. Much long-awaited champions video. So thanks to our DCOM colleagues, we've put together a montage of different champions saying why they want to be champions and what they get out of it. Then we have probably I think this is the stellar point is our panel. So we're going to ask panelists, 3 from online, 1 Beatrice is here in person here in Geneva. What do you bring to the network? What do you get from it? And what excites you the most about the strategy? Then we're going to have reflections from our HRD colleagues, well, Sharon Compton for the branch chief of HR Talent, and also Andrew Christian, who will be representing the staff union. And then we'll have Q&A. So that's it. Big packed agenda. Let's celebrate it. It's not going to be, I hope that it's the most structured and formal part of the whole day. And I would just love to give the floor over to Sukti and for your reflections. Thank you very much, Sukti. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Guler. And good afternoon to all of you in the room and those who are connected online. And for those who are connecting from other parts of the world, also good morning and good evening, depending on where you are. I'm very pleased to be with you here today on this very important day to celebrate the International Day of Persons with Disabilities. And how better to celebrate this day than to launch along with you the ILO's new Disability Inclusion Strategy for 2024-2027. And I should also say that the Director General was hoping to be here today to launch the strategy with you, but unfortunately he had to travel. But as Eric already mentioned, he is fully and totally committed to disability inclusion. And it's not only through his meetings, but also through many of his actions that we have seen. But coming back to the Disability Inclusion Strategy 2024-27, I would also like to thank many of you in the room today, those who have connected online for your contribution to the new strategy, but also going forward in advance for implementing this new strategy, be it senior managers, office directors, human resources, colleagues, the staff union, members of the Employee Resource Group on Disability Inclusion, members of the Disability Champions Network, and many others. And as Eric has already said, leadership in this context is extremely important. And as leaders, we need to model inclusion by how we work, what we work on, and whom we hire to work with. And back in January of this year, the global management team made a series of commitments on this topic. And every member of the global management team made pledges to improve accessibility and inclusion, including by hiring through the new hiring practices, more inclusive communications, programming, as well as more accessibility to meetings, just to name a few areas. And it is these commitments which have informed the ILO's new Disability Inclusion Strategy for 2024-27. And the strategy, as you know, was drafted through extensive consultations throughout the ILO, not only in Geneva, but also with colleagues in the field. And actually all of you, in some way or the other, have contributed to shaping this strategy. It is a living document, and it is also a blueprint for our work on disability inclusion over the next 4 years. And under this new strategy, a few elements, I think it was already mentioned by Eric, which will be highlighted. First and foremost, the work of the policy departments on disability inclusion will be made more visible, because many departments are already doing a lot of work, but it's not always that visible. But at the same time, we also need to up our game on this. Secondly, it will also, it is also based on the insights that were shared by the regional offices and the field offices. And that is a very important aspect of the new strategy. And thirdly, it will leverage the experience of our tripartite constituents, in particular to strengthen projects and programs that seek to mainstream disability inclusion. Now, this will ensure a cross-sectional approach to disability inclusion, what we might say a one ILO approach. And the ILO senior management team has endorsed the strategy, And as you might have seen during the governing body has also endorsed the strategy, and the governing body congratulated the ILO on the strategy. But at the same time, it also challenged us to move forward and take on new challenges. And I would like to take this opportunity to share the ILO's vision for disability inclusion, or the Director General's vision. And simply put, the vision is really to make ILO an employer of choice for persons with disabilities. And under the previous strategy for 2020-23, we achieved quite a bit. There were very important contributions made by all of us, which really moved us on the path of disability inclusion a bit forward, but we need to do a lot more. And we really need to do more if we are to truly value and promote the skills and talents of persons with disabilities. Becoming an employer of choice is, as has already been mentioned, having accessible, inclusive workplaces, and about viewing disability and the human diversity it represents as positive. It is also about valuing the lived experiences of disability as an organizational advantage. But being an employer of choice is more than that. It also requires ensuring that all the work we do is inclusive of persons with all kinds of disabilities, right from the design to the implementation. And to achieve this, we need to attract a broader and a greater range of qualified applicants amongst persons with disabilities. We need to improve the satisfaction of our existing staff with disabilities and staff who have dependents with disabilities. And we also need to increase their opportunities to contribute meaningfully and contribute equally. We also need to work towards mainstreaming disability inclusion in our development cooperation projects and in all our programs. And to achieve this, we have to be bold and we have to be forward-thinking. And we must ensure that disability inclusion is an intrinsic part of all the work that we do as in decent work, in promoting decent work and in advancing social justice. And I would like to thank all colleagues in headquarters and in the field for their support in helping ILO achieve the current level of disability inclusion that we have. But with your continued commitment, we can do even more, and we can improve the quality of our work and the life of persons with disabilities worldwide, whether they are our colleagues or whether they are our constituents or whether they are beneficiaries of our work. And if we do this, we will all feel the benefits. And we will have earned, finally, the title of being an employer of choice for persons with disabilities. Thank you.
Applause, and thank you so much, Sukti, for on disability inclusion and for echoing the voice of our DG, but also for showing how disability inclusion matters across different areas, such as leadership commitment, communication, policy work, programming, how we design things in the ILO, both in the HQ and at field level, and that was really nice. And in your opening remarks, you mentioned so nicely the importance of our colleagues with disabilities and or with dependents with disabilities. And that is why in the ILO, we have what we call the ERG, the Employee Resource Group on Disability Inclusion, nicely represented today by our colleague Priya Desai. So Priya, we would love to hear your comments about the importance of the ERG and the views of the ERG on disability inclusion in the ILO. You would have seen maybe that this event is interpreted in international sign, and to make sure that we release our colleagues on time, we also would like to ask you to keep the allocated time. So Priya, I have the hard task of giving you 5 minutes for your speech, so over to you, Priya.
I should probably read it from the bottom down upwards then. No, anyway, welcome, and thank you so much to colleagues who have opened this up, to colleagues, community, however, to all. I'm Priya Desai, and I am here today as an employee resource group Disability Inclusion Steering Committee member. I'm, just as a bit of a visual description, I come from India. I'm in my mid to late 50s. I'm wearing a black jacket with a white shirt. So a little bit about, and a few words about the ERGDI, if I may call it that, was created in early 2022. And currently we have some 30 members of the ERG, spanning headquarters and our field offices. We have members from policy departments, from the corporate service functions, from Infotech, the library, even the office of the legal advisor. We have members in the African region, the Asian and Pacific region, Arab states, and also recently we just had our first member from the Americas join. But whereas there can be, and we hear of issues related to the environment or specific situations in a region or at headquarters, the common denominator is always disability inclusion. Participation in the IRG is open to all ILO staff, interns, and also to ILO retirees. Among our membership are staff with disabilities, such as myself, and these can be visible or invisible disabilities, staff with dependents with disabilities, both, and also allies who do not belong to either of these two groups, but who want to make a meaningful contribution to the mission of the ERGDI and the work of the organization in this regard. I should say that the majority of our members have dependents or family members with disabilities, and that currently there are fewer members who are living with a disability. As new recruits with disabilities join the organization, we very much hope to be able to encourage them to join the ERG. The steering committee members meet weekly, and the larger group meets monthly. So just a bit on our activities and the impact of our work. It's a safe space to share experiences within the workplace and also externally, give and receive guidance, either individually or collectively as a group, and assist ourselves and members to reach out to responsible departments to access information and get advice on a range of disability inclusion topics. These can be accessibility, accommodation, education grants, and schooling-related questions. And just yesterday, it was interesting to hear at the pre-retirement seminar how many questions were asked by participants on the staff health insurance, for example. Several colleagues raised questions regarding the entitlements of their children with disabilities. Of course, also importantly, the role that the ERG has been able to play over the last couple of years in awareness raising, networking, promotion and involvement of disability inclusive policies and initiatives. There have been several examples over the last couple of years of colleagues reaching out to us and consulting with us to provide inputs. And to mention some of these, of course, the independent evaluation on disability inclusion, which then informed the creation of the new disability inclusion strategy, policy and strategy, which my colleagues have just mentioned. Events with senior management. We just saw the meeting that we were able to have with the Director General. And of course, it's important to note that in the UNDIS, leadership has scored very high and exceeded the ILO exceeds the requirements on the disability leadership of the UNDIS indicators. We've also had important support from the DDG in her role as our sponsor. And there's a very compelling video where the DDG highlights the importance of consultation and encourages engagement with the ERG. I would encourage you to look at this if you haven't seen it already on the Disability Inclusion website. Most recently, the recognition of the ERG's value was in the biannual report on the implementation of the strategy, the GB paper. again highlighting the need for collaboration with the ERG in the context of the UNDIS indicators. And I think that Sukti has also mentioned some of the challenges that still remain and where we need to address and do better. Lastly, I just want to mention, of course, our ongoing collaboration with DCN, custodians or enablers of the strategy. And lastly, I mention our membership with Purple Space, an international professional network on disability inclusion. So in a couple of words, what next? What in the eyes of the ERG is needed going forward? And we were inspired last week at the GDN network by the words of Purple Space's managing director, Brenda Roach. And he spoke about leadership, a word that you've mentioned now a number of times today here, leadership and the science and art of disability inclusion. He described the science as the mechanics, the governments, and the structure. And as illustrated just now, we are as an organization doing quite well in the science, all the consultation and inputs into organizational policies, initiatives, and strategies. But what is the art? And the art is the human side, the leadership side, according to Brendan. It's the advocacy skills, the leadership skills within the ERG, the negotiation, the motivation, the influencing, the not be shy to ask the hard questions. How do you make things happen? What's required to make it work and to face barriers and overcome these? It's a together we move the needle attitude. So we as the ERG believe that in order to move faster and more effectively in addressing some of the areas identified for improvement and making the ILO an employer of choice for persons living with disabilities, there has to be senior and continuous representation at the time of discussing the design and implementation of strategies and plans. The nothing about us without us in reality. We look forward, on that note, to an even stronger relationship in moving the ILO's DI agenda forward, and a more systematic and early consultation and coordination of efforts in-house with all relevant parties. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Priya. And you may, those of you who may be hearing or listening or watching what we're doing, it's a bit different than the normal clapping, the loud clapping. It's much more inclusive. This is something I've been learning with Guller, because sometimes people, those of us who have cognitive overload, it's being in an echoing place with loud noises. We can either use sign language, we can do this with our hands, we wave our hands back and forth, that's a form of also recognition, or the snap is also another way of recognizing each other without having to make too much noise. Thank you so much, Priya. That was really great to hear from your perspective and how the ERG has been growing. As I go on missions, we have just on missions in Southeast Asia and Africa, and I find more and more colleagues are coming to me. I'm not an ERG member, and they're asking about the ERG, and I'm saying, well, we'll write to the ERG. And over the last couple of years, there have been more colleagues who've been on the spectrum, and we're starting to see more and a variation of impairments. So people are feeling more comfortable about leadership and being open. So it's a great group, and I hope it just keeps on growing. Now, in terms of what makes us in the ERG, Disability Champions Network a bit different than focal point groups in the UN, is that we're not appointed. We sign up and we step up. And that's something it's a very different dynamic. So really for our ERG, TCN, you just have to have the approval of your supervisor, but you want to be like a dynamo for change wherever you are in the organization. And so what we did with this video we're going to show right now, with the help of our technical colleagues here, is that we asked a handful of our champions, why are you a champion? And not because you've been appointed, not because you think that it's going to be section 1, 2, or 3 of the strategy, but really from the heart and from the soul, professional and personal, why are you a champion? And so thanks to our good colleagues at DCOM, we finally put together this video. Thank you very much. And it's about 2 minutes of, again, this montage of, and we asked the question, why are you a champion? If our colleagues, the operator here, could please help us out, that'd be great. Matisse, no? Thank you.
Disability inclusion starts by wanting to make a difference. At the ILO, a growing number of colleagues are joining the Disability Champions Network. They are becoming catalysts for change, making their offices, departments, and programs more accessible and inclusive. From headquarters to field offices, these colleagues with and without disabilities are sending the message that disability inclusion is everyone's business. What motivates them to become disability champions?
Because I believe that to promote social justice in the world, we need to build an ILO that it's for everyone.
I always say that due to my disability, I try to be the best.
Because diversity is strength, inclusivity is power, and our upcoming generations deserve an inclusive world.
Because I want an inclusive workplace and programs where there is no discrimination and no one is left behind.
Because I want everyone to feel included and to enjoy their work.
Disability rights are human rights, and equal access makes the world a better place.
Because I believe ILO publications should be accessible to all.
Because together we can make a difference.
Because it forces me to ask myself questions I would simply avoid otherwise.
Because I believe we can't afford a future of work that leaves persons with disabilities behind.
Porque la responsabilidad de trabajar por un mundo del trabajo que sea inclusivo nos incluye a todos y todas.
Because true inclusion is only possible if we do it together.
Because disability inclusion should be the norm in all aspects of our society, especially in our work policies, in our labor laws.
Because we need to walk the talk.
And the video ends. You can contact us. That doesn't have the audio. We're going to fix that part. It's disability@ilo.org. If you want to join, come see us in the hallway. Come write to us, and we'd be more happy to really include more than right now. We have over 100 champions right now around the organization, and let's work this year for 100 more. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eric. I agree with you. Let's double, or why not triple, the number of disability champions in the ILO, and for this we count on your support. And we know that many of you who are in the room or online are already champions and are also very active in inviting your fellow colleagues to join us. And we are really, really happy to welcome everybody within the Disability Champions Network. So please, if you are not part of it yet, feel free to reach out anytime, and we will be happy to just simply include you in the network, and you will be able to access to many activities where we hear from experts, from other colleagues about disability inclusion work. And disability inclusion work is in all regions, in different topics. We focused on forced displacement, programming, accessible meetings, consultation, and so on. So I guess now we will start with our panel for today, and we have 4 excellent colleagues and also champions who will tell us about their work and how they implement the disability inclusion work at different level, both in the field and in HQ. And our great panelists were introduced a bit earlier by Eric. So we really are happy and welcome Beatrice, Johnny, Muya, and Maud for being part of our panel. Thank you for being here. And the first question that I would like to ask you is, what do you bring to the Disability Champions Network? So what do you bring to the Disability Champions Network? And I have, again, the hard task of giving 1 minute per panelists. And I will start with you, Beatrice. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Guler. Good afternoon, everyone. Happy to be in the room today here with you celebrating International Day of Persons with Disabilities. Because of the time constraints, I will keep it very short and straightforward. So, to the Disability Champions Network, I bring my knowledge on disability, particularly on youth with disabilities, not only work and employment related, but all spheres of life that then have influence in work. I also, of course, bring my own lived experience as a young woman with a physical disability with high support needs. And along with knowledge, and just as important, I believe, I think I bring a strong passion for disability rights and a strong openness to raise awareness on the topic, and if needed, to also use my own personal experience as a catalyst for change within the ILO.
That was clear and beautiful. Thank you, Beatrice. And now let's move to Sri Lanka. And Joni, over to you.
Thank you, Guler. Hello, everybody. So I'll just get to it as well for time purposes. What I bring to the network, I bring my heart, my experiences, and really a deep commitment to inclusivity. And for me, from a very young age, I've really felt what it's like to be seen as different. And that experience became my catalyst. And it shaped my empathy and ignited my lifelong passion to make the world of work more accessible, equitable, and inclusive for all. But it's not enough for me simply to talk about inclusion. I believe in leading by example, stepping up, even when it feels very uncomfortable or uncertain. And I've made efforts to push boundaries both for myself and for those around me. For me, I'd rather take the risk, fail, and learn from it than stay silent, because doing nothing, well, that would be my failure. And in the Disability Champions Network, I bring that same spirit, a willingness to be vulnerable, to take risks, to share, and to learn. And it's really a space where we can embrace discomfort, knowing it's the path to growth and ultimately the real change. And I come to the network to contribute, to learn, and to fight for a world of work where no one's left behind. Thank you. Back to you.
Thank you, Joni, and thank you as you were also actively part of the steering committee of the network. Now let's move to Zambia, and over to you, Muya.
Thank you very much. What I bring to the network is a deep understanding of the local context, particularly south of the equator in Central Africa. I have been raised by a woman who society named to be a woman by then, when the derogatory terms were quite common in the 80s, of being a woman who is mentally retarded. But that to me did not seem to be the case within our household context. This is a most amazing, intelligent woman who was practical and with a passion I've never seen any other person do. Again, having joined the Champions Network, I have extensive experience consulting organization of persons with abilities within our local context. And it is these practical solutions that I think truly speaks to the strong leadership that the ILO has through the office of our Director General. We've seen how he's made it a very emphatic step that ILO must be an employer of choice for persons with abilities. And actually also at country level, my country director, Mr. Wellington Chibebe, we traverse the length and breadth of our country in rural areas, consulting organization of persons and bringing about real change. So it's a combination of being a child raised by a woman with disabilities whom society wrote out. But hey, today I might be considered in my local setting as one person quite successful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Muya. It's also nice to have you as part of the steering committee of the network, and thank you for these nice words and to sharing your insights. And now let's come back to Europe and move over to you, Maud, to the ITC.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting the ITC-ILO to this important event. I'll actually move from an I to a we, because it's important to note that today I'm alone, but here representing a network of 35 incredibly motivated colleagues, the gender and diversity focal points, who are passionate and deeply committed to disability inclusion. And together, we've been working to raise awareness through events, among other, like the Inclusion Day, which this year was all about disability inclusion. We brought together more than 60 participants, including ITC and ILO colleagues, family members, institutional partners, for a full day of panel discussions, workshops, and activities. Beyond this, we have a specific group within the network, specifically focusing on disability inclusion, making all our activities accessible, removing barriers in recruitment processes, and making sure that everyone can fully engage in our activities. So I think these ideas and good practices can inspire others in the network. So there is so much potential for cross-learning and collaboration.
Thank you so much, Maud. And indeed, I agree, you really brought your big network to the network, your own network, into the Disability Champions Network. And this is just a great opportunity to remind all colleagues that you can be several colleagues from the same team to be part of the network. This is really not a problem, and indeed it's actually a strength. And the ITC colleagues are joining in big groups, and we really like that. So thank you, Maud. So now I have a second question to our panelists. And again, each panelist would have 1 minute to answer this question, which is, what do you get out of the Disability Champions Network? And again, I will start with you, Beatrice.
Thank you, Guler. So for me, there are two main and very important things I personally get out of the DCN. First, the DCN allows me to better understand the challenges that ILO colleagues, especially ILO colleagues without disabilities, face when trying to mainstream disability inclusion in their work. So of course, knowing these challenges is crucial for me to also become a stronger disability champion and also a stronger disability inclusion professional. So one that is able to better support the mainstreaming of disability inclusion throughout the whole organization. Additionally, of course, the DCN brings me a very important sense of community, because I truly believe that it serves as a great platform to share struggles, share good practices, and simply exchange ideas as well. So the DCN really is a safe space where everyone can learn in a very informal, casual way, both from colleagues with and without disabilities.
Thank you very much, Beatrice. What about you, Johnny? What do you get out of the network?
Thanks, Guler. So in this network, we don't just talk about inclusion, we live it, we learn from it, and celebrate the strides we're making, each of us in our own spheres of influence. And the atmosphere of the Champions Network is really one of openness, encouragement, and mutual support. And it's precisely that environment that makes it so powerful and meaningful to me. One experience that stands out for me and that shaped my journey with the Champions Network was during my time in Bangkok in the DWT, when I had the honor of being part of the Disability Champions Advisory Group. And I was thrilled to share with colleagues that I was recruiting my very first person with a disability to join our team on the JETI work. And it was a milestone moment and really an opportunity not just to talk about disability strategy and policy, but really to live it every single day. So I was very excited. And although I had no idea what it was going to be like, that uncertainty only made the experience really more meaningful. And I knew that no matter what happened, that I could draw on the experiences of other colleagues in the Champions Network, and that was very critical. And the recruitment process was challenging in many ways, from finding the reasonable accommodation funds for recruiting to hiring an American Sign Language interpreter out of Bangkok for the interview, to identifying candidates with disabilities in a sea of candidates. But colleagues were very supportive and answered my questions and helped identify solutions. And we successfully hired Anu. You saw her actually in the video earlier. She's a wonderful, exceptional, smart young Nigerian woman whose skills and energy and fresh perspective added really immeasurable value to our team. And she stayed on with the team after I transitioned over to Colombo as a country director. And I know she had a strong and positive impact on colleagues in Bangkok and proved that creating an inclusive and supportive work environment really benefits not just us individuals, but entire teams. And she's now looking for work. If anyone is hiring, I'd be pleased to share her contacts. Thank you.
Thank you, Johnny, for sharing this successful experience showing how we can go beyond the talk. What about you, Muya? What do you get out of the network?
Thank you very much, and a wonderful afternoon again. For me, really, the network is a resource group, and I think it has lived to my expectations. I don't know if many others colleagues in the ILO are actually aware that in 1922, the ILO was able to consult organizations of persons with disabilities. Of course, then it was looking at the post world wars and people that had those injuries. So I use the Champions Network as a resource, because some of the works that we do are landmark, especially the guidance that we're given, the steps, practical steps on how to have meaningful consultation and engagement with organizations of persons with disabilities. It's just an amazing piece of work and amazing resource. So for me, the network, I look at it having the experience from the global north running across the global south and making this a reality in our local context. Over to you.
Thank you, Muya, for highlighting the critical importance of having such resources and how to use them. And last but not least, I will now hand over to Maud.
Thank you, Guler. Well, first of all, I have to say how much I admire Eric and Guler's incredible expertise. It's always a privilege to learn from you and from other colleagues in the network. The sessions that I have attended are always eye-opening. They leave us with new perspectives on the world. Very similar, I think, to like the first time you're confronted with the gender lens or so. It's that level of aha moments. And on a practical note, what I really love is the inspiration we get from examples, ideas that can be adapted, replicated in other contexts. I think this knowledge sharing is incredibly valuable. And finally, being part of the network really strengthens also the one ILO mindset, reminding us how we must be the change we want to see, and that we are all working together toward a shared goal, decent work and social justice for all.
All right, thank you very much. Now it's over to me, and I've got to ask the most kind of exciting question about, okay, so you're in the network, you get a lot out of it, you put a lot into it. What about the strategy? What is it about? What are you excited about in the new strategy, or what are you already doing for the strategy? And I'm seeing we're just a bit over the halfway mark, so I'm going to really keep everyone to about 3 minutes tops. And so that's it's almost like a haiku. So what are you doing for the strategy? Because it's a 2024 strategy. We're already in 2024. So what are you doing, and what excites you the most? What should you look forward to from you? So I guess we'll start off again with Beatriz. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Eric. So first, allow me just to share how happy I am to be at the launch of the ILO's new disability inclusion strategy for the upcoming 4 years. I had the privilege to be working with the disability team on the design of the strategy, and of course, it's such an honor to have been there on the first conversation before starting the drafting process, to also have participated in the consultation that allowed me to understand the organization on a very deep level, and of course, to be here now and to see everything come to life. So huge congratulations to the disability team, Eric, Guler, Arya, and Jürgen in the room, and Stefan, who's unfortunately not in the room today. Congrats for your ambitious, strong, and very important document. When you read the strategy, which I'm sure you'll do right away when you leave the room, you'll see that one of the first standouts is the Director General's commitment to make the ILO an employer of choice for persons with disabilities, as it was already mentioned here today as well. And HRD is working on several fronts to ensure that the ILO leads by example and has a workforce that is qualified, skillful, diverse, while also being representative of the constituents it works for. So let me tell you about one of the most recent initiatives that we are doing in the talent branch in HRD. In the October 2024 roster, the ILO offered 11 internship positions exclusively reserved for candidates with disabilities, out of the total of 53 internship profiles. These reserved positions are both in ILO HQ in Geneva and field offices all around the world. The disability profiles are in all kinds of ILO technical areas of work because people with disabilities work in all range of topics, not just disability. Nonetheless, most also include learning areas related to equality and non-discrimination because these must be mainstreamed into ILO's work by first-person voices. We promoted the initiative among organizations of persons with disabilities all around the world, as well as among specialized universities, universities with disability centers, and the selection process is now ongoing. Hiring managers across the ILO in all different clusters and offices were able to benefit from training on disability inclusive recruitment. And also next year, the ILO will benefit from the expertise of young professionals with disabilities to further mainstream disability inclusion. So this pilot initiative aims not only to promote a culture shift in the ILO, because real change happens when you interact with persons with disabilities, but also to allow the ILO to learn and improve its talent, resourcing, and retention mechanisms to ensure that these are increasingly more accessible and more inclusive.
Thank you very much. That was like a master class in about 3 minutes. And you said you were so happy to participate in this, in creating the strategy, but I can truly say, working with you on that the strategy wouldn't be as complex and rich and powerful as it is without your participation. So thank you so much. And when you mentioned this new initiative with internships, this is a cutting edge. I think we can really learn from this experience and grow at large with an organization in terms of recruitment in writ large. So thank you very much. So we'll ask that very crucial question to it. I'm kind of cheating here because I was with Joni recently in Sri Lanka. We did a bunch of disability quality training. So I know firsthand what some of the things Joni's been doing. But over to you, Joni. What are you most excited about, and what's 2024 like for you?
Well, thank you, Eric, and I thank you for giving the opportunity to talk about some of the things we're doing. And I'd like to say we, because it certainly is not just one person, as many people have pointed out. So very excited about the new strategy. And since arriving in Colombo, I've really been proud to see how we've built momentum towards disability inclusion, thanks to the openness and commitment to the staff here. And when I became country director, I was determined to push for change. And I'm excited to say that we now have 3 projects actively working on disability inclusion, either mainstream or dedicated projects. And one of my key priorities was to ensure that we took meaningful steps to raise awareness and build capacity around disability inclusion and disability confidence. So as you mentioned, I pushed for disability equality training for our team. And we brought you out to Colombo to support us for a week, which was really a valuable investment. It was a major milestone, and through cost sharing between CO Colombo and DWT Delhi, we were able to make it happen in a cost-effective way. And this initiative wasn't only for us, it was extended to our colleagues from UN sister agencies, but it allowed us to showcase the ILO's expertise in this area, in this vital area, while at the same time fostering more of a collective responsibility and spirit around the UN system on disability inclusion. But we haven't stopped at the training and coaching. I'm proud to say that we're in the process as well of hiring an intern with a disability, and I've challenged my fellow UNCT country team members to do the same. And for me, inclusion isn't just a policy, it's a practice. So we have to lead by example. And as a country director, I now have the privilege, but also the responsibility of encouraging my team to push their boundaries and to step outside their comfort zone and truly integrate disability inclusion into everything that we do. And it hasn't been a year yet for me in Colombo, but I'm happy to report that we're already taking bold steps towards implementing our strategy and policy. And I envisage our country office as a place where disability inclusion is not just a top-down directive, but something that each person in their own sphere of influence can take action, whether it's operations, technical work, comms, event planning, development cooperation. I want to see every one of us being the model, the role model, and having a model office in the UNCT, leading by example and inspiring others to follow our lead. But it's not about us only. As we continue to make strides internally, we're also trying to work more closely with our constituents, learning with them and supporting them to build their own capacities for disability inclusion. And this will be key for us to influencing the world of work in Sri Lanka and in the Maldives to ensure that change doesn't stay within our offices, but also spreads far and wide. And we're trying to, finally, we're just trying to be an example. Thank you. Back to you.
Thanks so much, Joni. And I just want to take out a couple of words you said of like partnership. I mean, this wouldn't have happened without the partnering between Sri Lanka office and Delhi office, and then across the UN system. But I think it's also partnership. We keep on hearing this word leadership. I mean, to have a country leader from a country office really make these public commitments and follow through with change and and really enabling people who work in Sri Lanka, I think it's amazing. I mean, it was such a fantastic mission, but it was fantastic because I wasn't the one driving the change. You know, I was just there to provide the technical support, but it really was your leadership and Michiko's leadership in New Delhi. So I think it's absolutely fabulous. Thank you so much. So we'll shift over now. Again, Muya, give us an idea from Lusaka. What was the exciting thing this year, or where do you want to go to next year for the new strategy?
Thank you, Eric. I think allow me to draw on one experience. Immediately I joined the ILO in about 2020. The very first thing I said is charity begins at home. If I'm employed on a project to support disability inclusion and yet our offices are not accessible, that really bothered me a lot. So the very first thing I did was to do an accessibility audit. And if you look at our inclusion strategy, particularly, I think that's E, which looks at around the barriers in terms of our working environment. I think CEO Lusaka is a perfect example of a field office that has taken practical steps using resources that are available to ensure that at least we have basic features required for accessibility in terms of an accessible environment. So going into next year, I really want to strengthen D of our inclusion strategy, and this is consultation with organization of persons with disabilities. So for the country office, the works and the investment that we've been doing with the host government, with a state agency called Zambia Agency for Persons with Disabilities, has been recognized at national level. A historical thing happened. The sitting president, for the very first time in the history, and Eric, it was like we've rehearsed this line. The Director General for ILO sat with colleagues with disabilities, and in Zambia, the president did call all organizations of persons with disabilities, and they had a round table. And we are thinking using the office of our director to actually do a congratulatory, because that's commitment of leadership at the very highest level. So going into next year, we have supported the development of an OPD digital register across the country so that OPDs can easily be accessed by other institutions across the UN. And we've also done the communication strategy with active participation of organization of persons with disabilities. And my director told me, Muya, we don't want to launch this strategy in the city. We should take it into the rural areas and ensure that we are able to address some of the misconceptions and myths about disability inclusion. So really, for me, I'm excited we have this inclusion strategy that makes some of our works, some of us working on this subject, a reality, and giving it a bit of direction in terms of the upcoming next 4 years. Over to you, Eric.
Thank you so much, Muya. And I love the fact you're saying, take it to the rural areas. You know, the strength of this new strategy is we're taking it to the region. And it's not an HQ taking it or imposing it on the region. We worked in partnership with all the regional offices, all the regional directors. I think that was the brilliant thing that Sukti mentioned when the Director General was working in Turin for the retreat, and he had the global management team there. And we did a training at the behest of the Director General on disability inclusion. And we not just have leaders that walk the talk, but actually drive the change, which I think is fantastic. And when you say, like, let's bring it to the regions, let's bring it to the rural areas, but more, let's just let the regions lead. And I think then we can all lead in our respective areas. And lastly, I think, Maud, bring us home. What is it? What are your thoughts? What excites you about the strategy? Where do you want to see it go? What's kind of a vision for ITC? It's the floor is yours.
Thank you, Eric. Well, the ITC ILO is really proud to be mentioned for the first time in the ILO's new disability inclusion strategy. It's such an important recognition of what we're doing. We contribute in several ways. One that's especially exciting is the online course promoting disability inclusion, Make the Change Happen, under the leadership of Luisa Guimarães, is Gen Program Manager, in partnership with you, ILO JD, and the disability inclusion team in the Executive Office of the UN Secretary General. So it trains UN staff, including ILO colleagues, on disability inclusion, and I think it's a great example of the One UN approach in action. Another area that we're focusing on is making all our activities accessible, whether online or on campus. We have a very dedicated IT team constantly improving digital accessibility, and now we also have a network of welcome ambassadors who support participants and resource persons on campus, helping them overcome barriers and making their experience as smooth as possible. We're also sharing resources and building a community of practice to support colleagues in their work on disability inclusion. On the internal training side, some of our colleagues have already completed the disability equality training and courses on disability inclusion, digital accessibility, becoming champions. And we're also aiming to make the ILO's disability inclusion course mandatory here at the center with the support of HR. And of course, we're also working on increasing the recruitment of persons with disabilities. And finally, under the new strategy, we're planning to develop a dedicated action plan on disability inclusion for the ITC ILO. So there's so much happening. It's a really exciting time, and we look forward to keeping the momentum going together. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Maud. I just want to mention one thing of all the many things that the ITC is doing right now. For a couple of years in a row, the Secretary General of the United Nations report on implementation of the UN Disability Inclusion Strategy mentioned the fact that ITC ILO was providing this UNDIS, the UN Disability Inclusion Strategy training, for all focal points in the UN, for UNDIS focal points. So it's really, I think this whole drive in the strategy is not just us internally, but it's what we can give to the UN. So I think it's absolutely fantastic that it's to the ILO, ITC, also to the world. Thank you so much. And I think I have the pleasure to now move over, Guler, to our HRD representative. Am I introducing her? I can't remember if you're introducing her.
You can start, and I want to start you.
Okay, excellent. Okay, I'll move over there. So our good colleague and friend Sharon Compton, the branch chief of HR Talent, please, any reflections you have on what we've heard so far, or any things that you're thinking about the strategy and upcoming work? The floor is yours, Sharon.
Thank you so much, Eric. And it's really a wonderful opportunity to be here with you all today on this special day dedicated to persons with disabilities. And being here today and listening to the ILO's vision that was shared with us by Sukti, and all of the support that the DG gives to that vision, and hearing from the disability champions and hearing from the employee resource group on disability inclusion, it made me think back to December 2019, when a group of us were together as the new UNDIS custodians and kind of wondering what the future was going to bring. And we had a disability equality training together, and we laid out plans for what would then become the disability inclusion strategy for 2020-2023. And amongst those plans included seeking strong leadership support for disability inclusion, setting up a disability champions network, and setting up an employee resource group on disability inclusion. So it's really exciting to see that those plans have come into fruition and that the same focal points are still really completely engaged. And I see some colleagues here that we worked with on that first day and that we've continued to work with. And that first strategy that we had was kind of like first steps towards a disability inclusion strategy. But when we look at the new one for 2024-2027, we can see that there are much greater ambitions. And I think part of what gives us confidence in putting out those great ambitions is that support that we know that we have from the leadership, from the GMT, from the DG, from the Disability Champions Network, and the way that that can really powerfully spread the work globally. And the support that we get from our ERG also in helping us to understand and consulting with us on many of the things that we're working on. So this element about ensuring that the ILO becomes an employer of choice for persons with disabilities, in the current strategy, that's actually one of the indicators, and it's one of the ones that's assigned for HRD to work on. And it will be in the future strategy as well. But in fact, it's become the watchword for this strategy for the next 4 years. So that's really, really exciting. But you know, it's not easy to know whether you are an employer of choice for persons with disabilities. You need to know whether persons with disabilities are applying to join the organization. And you need to know whether there are staff in the organization who have disabilities and whether these staff are satisfied with their experience of working in the organization. And that's not something that we always know. We don't always ask these questions, and it can be difficult to ask. But in 2021, in the staff survey that we launched, and again in the staff survey that we just launched in 2024, we did include some questions in the demographics to ask people, do you consider yourself to be a person with a disability or a person who has dependents with a disability? And because we asked those questions, we were able to actually then look at the results around employee experience from people who said, yes, I am a person with a disability, or I am a person who has a dependent with a disability, and compare those to their experience, the experience of other colleagues who said, no, I'm not. And also to get a sense of how many people within the organization do we have that would say, yes, actually, I am a person with a disability. And we also had a very specific survey on disability inclusion, and many, many colleagues answered that. And from that, we've gained a lot of information. So we have a starting point, and what that starting point shows us that we definitely need to make efforts to increase the number of staff that we have in the organization with disabilities. And I don't think that's a surprise for anybody. And also that we have work to do around that level of satisfaction of those employees. If we're really serious about the commitment that we want to make, that the ILO becomes an employer of choice. You've heard from Beatrice about the initiative that we have for interns with disabilities, and she mentioned that this actually has a deeper, more strategic aim, which is aligned with this desire to become an employer of choice, because we are planning to build on the experience and from the lessons learned to support us in increasing the number of staff with disabilities, and also through looking at those experiences that we get through this and the lessons learned, that we would also be able to look at how we can improve our recruitment processes. So what's really interesting is through this initiative for hiring interns with disabilities, through the outreach, we've actually expanded our contact database for organizations with persons with disabilities, for focal points for persons with disabilities at universities, and for specialized universities that are especially for persons with disabilities. So we can now use those contacts as a way to get more applicants for our staff positions from persons with disabilities. We also want to really ensure that our hiring practices are inclusive and enable persons with disabilities to compete equitably with others who don't have disabilities. And this internship initiative, through that, we have been developing some specific guidelines for hiring managers in this regard. So we've learned a lot through this in terms of, okay, what is the experience going to be hiring interns with disabilities? And then we can apply that same thing into our hiring practices for staff. We also have learned through this process a lot about the type of challenges that applicants may face when using our recruitment system. So we know, and it came out of the survey, that there are some areas that we need to improve in accessibility of our recruitment system. But actually having this process where we have a lot of applicants with disabilities all trying to apply more or less around the same time, it's given us the opportunity to see, okay, so where do they get stuck? What types of things do we need to look at changing to make it more accessible for a whole range of different forms of disabilities? We're also learning more about the types of reasonable accommodation that we may face when colleagues require in order to either come for an interview or indeed to be able to work and join the office and work equally with others when they come into the office environment. This just goes back a little bit to what Joni was saying. You know, it's the first time that you do something, you learn an awful lot. And some of that, even practical things like aspects about getting visas and carte de légitimation for the carers that may come with certain colleagues. So this is a big learning experience for us that we're taking and will be applying to this effort going forwards of making the ILO an employer that is a preferred employer for persons with disabilities. And then also included in the disability inclusion strategy, we are ensuring that staff across the office have access to training on disability inclusion. And you heard Maud mentioning that they're going to put in place the training that we have here, there, and also I met Maud when she came here for a training on disability inclusion, so on disability equality training. So we're doing a lot of work with the ILO on this. But we're also, through this internship initiative, looking at how do you train teams when there's an intern with a disability coming in to ensure that it's a welcoming environment for a person with disabilities. And through that, although it's currently for this specific internship initiative, we know that that will bring for the future, for colleagues coming in as staff members, it will also bring big changes. It's a privilege to be a part of this work. It's very rich, and the richness comes from learning from our colleagues with disabilities, Asa, Priya, Gula, Beatrice, Priya, and some of it stems also from the enthusiasm of the disability champions, and some of it comes from the level of commitment that we're getting from our senior leaders. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Sharon. It was really important to hear about the ILO's growing ambitions in terms of disability inclusion, and you have shared a few concrete examples. You have also talked about persons with disabilities as persons who might already be in the organization, and it was important to hear about the staff survey as an initiative to try to find out how many persons with disabilities or with dependents with disabilities do we have already working with us, around us, because these persons might be colleagues, managers, supervisors, any persons that we might meet in the organization without necessarily knowing that. Indeed, we don't necessarily need to know which kind of disabilities do they have or any medical conditions. It is really done in the interest of providing reasonable accommodation, responding to needs. So it was also nice to hear about the importance of providing reasonable accommodation through your views. And we also, I think, listened with interest the initiative on the recruitment of interns with disabilities. And I feel we are all very impatient to welcome these interns with disabilities into the organization soon. So thank you, Sharon. I will now give the floor to the staff union, which is represented today by Andrew Christian. So Andrew, over to you.
Thank you, Gula, and good afternoon, everyone. And thanks very much to the DCN for inviting us to be here today. I'm speaking to you today as the current Assistant General Secretary in the Staff Union. And as many of you are aware, the Staff Union has many working groups on many subject matters, and one such working group covers diversity, equality and work-life balance, and one subject within that is disability inclusion within the ILO. Being here today, it's great to hear all of the work that colleagues are doing with the constituents, but I just want to say that the Staff Union has an inward-looking lens, addressing the terms and conditions of all staff, those with and without disabilities. And with regards to the disability issues, the working group recognised the importance, and as of we have heard today about nothing about us without us, and to address this, we are happy to have a member of the ERG as one of our technical advisors within that group. And we welcome staff raising any issues at any time with us. The Staff Union raises matters that may affect staff with disabilities or staff whose dependents may have disabilities. And one issue we recently raised with the administration was in reference to Article, and forgive me, but it's Article 3.13 of the staff regulations that talk about family allowances in the general service category for family allowances in the general service category at Geneva that are doubled, etc. The staff regulations mentions P staff, but it's unfortunately silent on the allowances that are available for general service category in the field for this. We raised this with the administration, and we found out that these allowances are available in the field. We received a positive response, but now we await explicit reference to this in the staff regulations and other office texts as necessary. With regards to the staff union vision, we make the comment that it's difficult for us to provide our vision and insights in implementing this new strategy, 2024 to 2027, when this strategy was published today, towards the end of 2024, obviously. It's great that this strategy has now been published and we'll be looking at it. We were consulted on it to begin with, but now it's been published, we will look at it. Also, we are advised that the staff survey on disability inclusion was concluded. We are informed in October 2023, but to the best of our knowledge, the results have yet to be published, so we don't really know the views of all of the staff on that. So it makes it difficult for us to act on the views of the staff if the results of the survey has yet to be published. We note in the draft Disability Inclusion Strategy 2024 to 27, it stated in 2024 that a new IGDS on disability inclusive employment and reasonable accommodation is adopted in consultation with the staff union and implemented. Consultations carry on later this week in relation to that, and thus it is unlikely that this IGDS will be available in 2024. As mentioned in the strategy. But the staff union are happy to receive any information from any colleagues on any matters that they think should be raised, and we also stand by to be consulted on all matters and hope that the timelines will not slip too much due to matters beyond our control. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew, and it was really great to collaborate with the staff union, with the ERG, with HR, with a lot of people in the House to develop that strategy. And I know we've learned a lot about communications. You know, we learned a lot that we need to have regular communications with the staff union, and we've started up these monthly meetings, so I hope we can continue to do that. So thank you very much. Okay, looking at the clock, we have about 10 minutes, and I would like to really invite any questions that you have. I've been looking at the chat box, Cooler, and I haven't seen any questions from those online. So if those of you will start, I invite those of you online, please ask any questions you'd like of the panelists or anyone who's spoken. And maybe we could start, if the people in our colleagues in the room would like to ask any questions, you can, I've been told that the chat box has been deactivated. So that may be a bit of an accessibility problem. So I'm not sure if our colleagues up here in the technical up above could help a bit. If can we reactivate the chat box? In the meantime, anyone here in the room, if you'd like to put on your microphone and ask a question, as punctual as possible so we can see it, that we can have the panelists or anyone here answer. So please, those of you on the floor here in Geneva, please, if you have any questions. Great, you can put on your microphone, that'd be great. Thank you. And just, you can say who you are and then we'll ask questions.
Yes, my name is Kahisa Nyakilawang. I'm with the ILO Social Protection Department. I think this is a great time to be together celebrating inclusivity. I think maybe thinking about how we can magnify this next year. I think it will be great if we can give space and showcase some of the inclusivity projects as well as in-house programs so that we really shine the light on the excellent work that colleagues are doing. Last week we participated in the Global Business Network, Global Business and Disability Network. I thought that was a great opportunity where, again, you know, the world of business was also speaking very much from the same page as the people in this room. And I think for me that was a wealth of opportunities, especially around resource mobilization to fast track some of our inclusive work. And I think it's something that I think as a house we need to really rally around and ensure that, you know, ILO can really carry this diversity and inclusion, which is sorely needed in these days. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was really great that you mentioned about sharing, because I think Gulor and I were talking about with the steering committee of the DCN this year, for the coming year, for 2025, maybe going regional and, you know, having, you know, regional sharing and showing what people are doing, because people are doing a lot. I find this a lot when I say, well, you know, I wish someone was doing something on youth and disabilities or green jobs and disabilities. And then I turn around and there's a colleague next to me saying, well, I'm doing that right now. So I think we can really use kind of the DCN as a clearinghouse for these ideas. And the GBDN, that was absolutely amazing. That yearly meeting is a great event, and a great event to kind of showcase inclusion in the ILO. I know some of the Disability Champions Network members were also there learning and growing and learning how to provide assistance to attendees with disabilities. So that was also a really good practice, and I hope we can feed back on that soon. Any other questions in the room here? I'm not sure. I'm not going to pin this on our technical colleagues. It's not their fault that this is deactivated. I think sometimes in a webinar it deactivates it. So let's see if we can find it. Yeah, please do. Just put on your microphone.
Hi. Thanks for this great event and for this celebration of the International Day of Persons with Disabilities. I remember last year there was an event on the findings of the evaluation on the last disability strategy, and I was just wondering how this new strategy has maybe taken that into consideration.
Yeah, I think it really did, because we looked at we looked at how much we've gone, and for example, the things like we needed to recognize the work of the champions, because I think we forgot to do that. We've been working so hard and doing inclusion within the ILO, but for 3 years we didn't say, hey, you're doing a good job, and kind of value what people are doing. And I think that's one good thing. The other thing was that we just haven't, we've been doing bits and pieces, but we haven't been getting out to everyone. The idea is, all of our meetings should be inclusive, all of our projects and programs to be inclusive. And I think that evaluation was a real wake-up call that we haven't made all the deep changes we need. And we learned that we can't do it all in the DCN. It's going to be a partnership, administration, staff union, ERG. We can all kind of work together from our perspective. So we definitely took on board what we learned from the evaluation, and that in itself was an inclusive process. So that was really good. Thank you. Thank you for that. Okay, so there are some things coming here in the chat box. Let's see if I can get. Gulor, I'll read out a few of these questions.
Oh yeah,
is it okay?
Great.
So, what allowances or incentives can an employee with a disability receive? And there is a possibility that ILO jobs could include an option box so candidates can identify them themselves as a person with, is there a possibility ILO jobs can identify themselves as a person with a disability? Other agencies have something like this in their hiring practice. We may not be able to get into everything about the benefits for example, if someone has a dependent with a disability, but I'm not sure if either staff union or HR would like to address any of this so far. I know right now, and each agency is taking a different perspective on this. Right now, we think maybe it would have a chilling effect if in the application process we put a box saying, do you have a disability? Some agencies are doing that, some agencies aren't. So I think there's a lot of like pre-steps we have to take, as Sharon said, surveys, building up our communication, so there's that confidence and people can share. So right now, I'm not sure if putting a box saying, do you have a disability or not, at the time of application would be the way forward, but it is certainly, indeed, we're starting to do you need reasonable accommodation from the interview process on or from the application on? And that is a good practice, because in that way we don't specify, do you have a disability, but rather, do you have a requirement? I don't know, Gula, if you want to mention anything on that.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. I agree. Knowing who has a disability or not might not be the way forward to put someone at ease and make sure they're comfortable to share, especially if you apply to a position in a place that you don't know yet. You don't know how that might be received, and unfortunately, statistics show that many persons with disabilities are being discriminated against when they are applying to jobs. That's a reality, and so we would rather encourage employers to ask if there is a need of reasonable accommodation, and to make sure application processes are accessible. And I think there was also a question on the incentives into employment and what employers would get if they recruit persons with disabilities. And there are usually in the world, there are two models of encouraging employers to do so. The first one is setting up some quotas on inclusion of persons with disabilities. Some countries might say, okay, each company need to recruit 4% of their staff to have a disability. That's great, but it doesn't indicate really what opportunities are out there for the person in terms of career evolution. So we need to be aware of that. And the other model is just providing reduction on taxes for employers who show that they can employ many persons with disabilities would get some, as I said, some kind of tax advantages. And sometimes there might be models that are a mix of both. So, but again, if you have any questions on that, you can address to us on our email addresses or also to disability@ilo.org.
Thank you very much, Gula. I don't know if any of our panelists want to respond to these questions, or if since I know that we're going to lose our excellent interpreters because it's their right to finish on time. Thank you very much for your help today. I just want to say first, before you go home, thank you very much. Thank you very much. And I was wondering if anyone from the panel, either online or here, would like to make any closing idea. If you have one last idea you'd like to share, anything you'd like to share with our colleagues here, Beatriz or Priya. Okay, I'll take silence as no. We'd like to do something just to end. Oh, please, Beatriz. Oh, Muia, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. I really wanted to talk about the use of improving systems and frameworks, especially in the country office, to increase the identification and certification of persons with disabilities. I think ILO, like I did make mention, from 1922, been working with the Organization of Persons with Disabilities. In the country office for Zambia, if we are really interested in disability assessment and certification, we are championing a functional assessment model with UNICEF, where even community members will be able to administer and bring about that. So it's a registration system which is totally digital in nature. I thought I can make mention about this, especially on this important day. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Muia. And I just want to mention in the chat box, you may have seen that there is a meeting going on in Latin America right after this meeting on disability inclusion. So, and that's one of our good colleagues, Andres, from the Americas. I think we can leave on an interesting note that brings together a lot of things we talked about. Gullar and I were just actually with the Prospects Project in Ethiopia. We learned a lot. We went to a refugee camp. We worked with refugees with disabilities. We saw a lot of the great work being done by the Prospects Project. And at the behest of Stephen Opio, there and head of the Prospects Project in Ethiopia, he put together a salutation, a video to celebrate the 3rd of December. And he interviewed us there on the spot. And this is just an example of the regions taking charge, getting the drivers. So we'd like to share this very quickly made homemade video from Ethiopia that kind of puts into, it is the strategy, actually.
Exactly. Thank you, Eric. Eric and I are just back from Ethiopia 2 days ago. Indeed, we are still taking our malaria pills because we need to take them for a week still after the trip. So I don't know if we are fully landed in Geneva, but we are very happy to be here. Yeah, we wanted to show this video, which would allow us to end this great event on a very positive note and show the great work of the Prospects Ethiopia team. As it allowed us to have a fact-finding mission there. And with Eric, we were, as he said, in refugee camps, mainly in the Somali region, which is near the border with Somalia. And this mission will allow us to create some standards for Prospects colleagues on including refugees and internally displaced persons and host communities with disabilities into their work, mainly in the Horn of Africa and also in the Middle East. And indeed, we will be going back to Ethiopia in March to present the results of this great work. So we wanted to show this video, and we really thank each one of you for attending our event. It was really interesting and really great to see the familiar colleagues, the family of the Disability Champions Network, and it would be great to keep welcoming more colleagues in the network. So please encourage all colleagues around you to be part of the network. And thank you for joining. And we would really like to end this event with this nice video. And thank you, Eric, as well.
Yeah, thanks to all the panelists. Thank you very much, everyone who is online and in person. It's just been a real delight. And thank you, Gullar, for your leadership in this. Could we move, maybe our colleague Matisse, if we had some problems with getting the video online, so thank you very much. Can we try it? It's 2 minutes, and with that, we can consider this closed on a very joyous note. Over to you, Matisse. On this December 3rd, we have so much to celebrate in the ILO. We're launching our 2024-2027 Disability Inclusion Strategy, a pillar that is including everyone in all regions. We work with our partners, governments, workers, and employers. We reach out to all workers and employers, including those with disabilities.
Persons with disabilities are a very diverse community. Therefore, it is important to pay specific attention to host communities and refugees with disabilities in Ethiopia. It is also important to provide them with durable solutions in terms of inclusion into the world of work.
We have been implementing various projects which benefits persons with disabilities in different contexts. For instance, the last project that we call it INAS, which works on the inclusion of persons with disabilities in employment and training, which focuses on inclusion of persons with disabilities in the context of refugees and IDPs. So we have been working together for creating decent jobs for persons with disabilities for the last 20 years.
አካል ጉዳተኛው በተለያዩ በፖለቲካ ውስጥ መሳተፍ አለበት፣ የመሪነት ሚና እንዲኖረው መደረግ አለበት። በብዙ መንገድ ያው አካል ጉዳተኛ ራሱን ችሎ እንዲቆም መንግስት የራሱን ከፍተኛ የሆነ ተጽዕኖ መፍጠር አለበት። እኛ አካል ጉዳተኞችም ደግሞ ከወትሮ በተሻለ ሞጋች ሆነን ጠያቂ ሆነን ግንዛቤ ፈጥረን ራሳችንን ለማውጣት መቻል ይኖርብናል ብዬ አስባለሁ።
Thank you so much. It just is the last thing we'd say that thank you everyone. It was Sukti, Priya, Beatriz, Johnny, Muya, Maud, Sharon, and Andrew, and particularly Guler for your leadership here. Thank you for making this happen. Thank you all for making the champions happen. And that's the way we're going to go forward with the new strategy. Thank you so much. Have a blessed day.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you, each one of you.
And thanks to our technical colleagues here for doing all the hard work of getting the videos up and running. Thanks, Matisse.